In previous episodes of Delayland, we talked about things that are just not what they used to be. German punctuality, for example, or car making.
In this episode of Delayland, we look at big construction projects like building an airport, a train station, or a concert hall.
Projects where good planning is essential. Projects where delays can be really expensive.
Projects you might have thought Germany, the country of plans, rules, and efficiency, would excel in.
If you've been following this podcast, you'll know what's coming. But if this is your first experience of Delayland and you still think Germany is a planner's paradise, think again.
So many big projects are taking much longer than planned, and they usually end up blowing the budget. We just have to ask, what the happened? I'm Nicolas.
I'm Andreas. And this is
Delayland. Germany and the missing magic. Brought to you by DW.
Episode 3, Bricks and Bureaucracy.
Let's start with a quick list of big construction projects that earned Germany its Delayland nickname.
A new airport in Berlin, Germany's capital. Planned construction time, 5 years.
Actual construction time, 14 years.
A new central train station for Stuttgart, a major city in Germany's south. Planned construction time, 9 years.
Actual construction time, 16 years and counting.
The Elbphilharmonie, a new concert hall in Hamburg, Germany's second largest city. Planned construction time, 3 years.
Actual construction time, 9 years.
These 3 projects took between 2 and 3 times longer to complete than planned, and the delays led to cost explosions.
The final bill was sometimes 3 times higher than initially estimated, sometimes even 10 times more expensive.
Delays and cost overruns are surprising because Germany has a reputation for being very good at planning, budgeting, and time management.
Some of that reputation stems from World War II, when Nazi Germany became infamous for the meticulous planning in its war machinery and the killing of millions of people.
But even after the war, the speed of Germany's resurgence surprised many. Within a few years, the country went from the ruins of the war to an economic powerhouse.
Lots of houses and infrastructure had to be rebuilt after the war, and planning and building was usually fast and efficient.
Let's now focus on one particular example to learn what can go wrong with big construction projects. In the 1950s, the West German city of Cologne decided it was time to build a new opera house.
The location was symbolic, right in the center of the city, on a plot that had been reduced to rubble during the war.
The architect Wilhelm Riepan wanted his design to reflect a new, democratic Germany, decidedly modern, without the neoclassical frills that make many traditional opera houses look like the palaces of kings.
Construction started in the summer of 1955, and less than 2 years later, the building was inaugurated as a major venue for opera and theater.
Das festliche Spiel hat begonnen.
Germany's post-war chancellor, Konrad Adenauer, was at the inauguration. It was, after all, his home city. And a few weeks later, the world-famous and legendary opera singer Maria Callas performed at the new venue.
Half a century after its grand opening, it was felt that the historic building needed to be brought up to date and renovated. By then, it had grown to host 3 different venues: the opera itself, a theater with 2 stages, and a children's opera with its own stage.
The renovation began in the summer of 2012. The plan? 3 years of work, doors back open in late 2015. Fast and efficient.
In the meantime, singers, actors and musicians would have to perform in temporary locations elsewhere in the city.
Not ideal for them, but then again it's only 3 years, right? And as the saying goes, time flies when you're having fun.
Das ist doch interessant.
My name is Emily Hendricks. I am an ensemble soloist at the Oper Cologne. I get to play dress up for a living. I go to work and put on funny outfits and act like an absolute lunatic, and they pay me to do this. So that's what I love the most.
That was Emily, performing in a contemporary opera. Emily is American, born in New Orleans. She trained to be an opera singer, toured the world, and then settled in Germany with her family.
For opera singers, Germany is as good as it gets. No other country has more opera performances and more opera houses, where artists are paid well and tickets remain relatively affordable, thanks to large subsidies with taxpayers' money.
Coming from America, it seems like Candyland. It seems like endless possibility, and the fact that Germany has perhaps the most number of opera houses per capita worldwide. To me, it's a tremendous gift. That's why I live here.
Emily's contract with the Cologne Opera started in 2015. She was told her first performance would be the grand reopening of the opera house, which was scheduled after the 3 years of construction for the fall of that year.
But on Emily's first day of rehearsals in the summer of 2015, it became clear that the reopening would be delayed.
At the time, I thought, okay, this is something that they'll figure out, and maybe in a year or in the middle of the season, maybe this is something that will be dealt with quickly. I was optimistic.
That was more than a decade ago. Since then, Emily has not set foot in the opera building once. The building is still a construction site.
You heard right. 10 years after the planned reopening, renovations have yet to be completed. Emily and her fellow artists have had to perform in makeshift venues far from the city's center. The same goes for the theater and its actors.
My name is Andreas. I am an actor, currently employed and have been since 1998 at the Cologne City Theatre.
Like Emily, Andreas is frustrated. The past 10 years have been a roller coaster of emotions.
Hope, despair, anger, and increasingly ridicule. New dates were being floated time and again when we would move, and they just never turned out to be true.
2015, the original reopening of the opera is cancelled due to technical problems.
2016, the opening is delayed by 6 years.
2019, more problems delay the opera's reopening by a year.
2021, COVID. New date, 2024.
2024, another team takes charge. New date, 2026. All these delays have caused the construction cost to skyrocket. The original estimate of 250 million has more than tripled to 850 million euros.
If you factor in additional expenses such as interest rates for loans and the rent for interim venues, the bill is an eye-watering 1.5 billion euros.
It makes me sick. I mean, it feels like throwing good money after bad over and over and over again.
That mess up is also epic and magical in a way. I might want to call it of Greek tragic proportions.
But even Greek tragedies are nothing compared to construction in Cologne.
A delay of a decade is bad enough, but delays in Cologne can stretch to hundreds of years and even get celebrated. We're talking about the Cologne Cathedral, or as the locals say, der Kölner Dom.
So, we have been climbing a long stone spiraling staircase for what seemed forever. And now we are on some kind of metal and wood construction. And in just a little bit, we'll be able to see the city from what used to be the tallest building in the world.
So we're almost there.
Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more.
The Cologne Cathedral is still the tallest twin-towered church in the world. Its towers are almost 160 meters high.
It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site right in the center of the city. It belongs to the Roman Catholic Church and is Germany's most visited landmark.
It's also a monument whose construction suffered one of the longest delays in history.
Construction started in 1248. Within a few decades, parts of the main building were completed, but the towers were not finished, and the whole thing didn't look like a church at all.
Then Cologne ran out of money, and for many centuries, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. An abandoned crane atop an unfinished tower became a landmark in its own right.
Only 600 years after the start of construction did someone say, "Let's finish this thing." The timing was right because Germany was about to unite its many small kingdoms and duchies into one nation-state for the first time. And finally finishing the Cologne Cathedral became a national mission.
In 1880, the job was finally done.
We made it!
Look over there. Can you see that building over there?
Oh wow, that's the opera, that's the theater.
Yeah, that's the opera and the theater. Just a stone's throw away from the cathedral.
And viewed from the top, viewed from the cathedral's roof basically, it looks really tiny.
Yeah, and also the delay of more than a decade seems to be pretty tiny.
Back down on the ground, theater actor Andreas takes refuge in humor.
It took 600 years to finish. I do hope we're going to outperform them. I really do.
The main reason that it took so long to finish the church was money. Cologne simply ran out of cash.
It's much harder to explain why today's opera construction is more than a decade behind schedule. In fact, it seems impossible.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody can pinpoint to what exactly went wrong. It's sort of all a big, confusing, super complex web of causalities but nobody has ever been able to explain to me what exactly happened.
Really? Nobody knows?
My name is Jürgen Mark Vollm. I'm the project leader of the opera building in Cologne.
Jürgen Vollm, as the guy in charge of the opera renovation project, he must know what has gone wrong.
At a specific point in time, you lose control of the project because 64,000 square meters.
In every corner, in every room, 2,000 rooms, people tried to fix the project, but no one has the overview again what is really taking place in these different areas. And so a lot of rework had to be done because permissions were not given appropriately, defects secured, design defects, construction defects, companies went bankrupt into insolvency. You had to bring on new companies, they had to get into the project, understand the project. The project was very
difficult to embark on the project.
Whoa. We asked Jürgen for a shorter, simpler answer. Something a child could understand.
Something we could understand.
I would say people didn't talk appropriately with each other. That went wrong.
To be fair, Jürgen is not personally responsible for the mess at Cologne's opera. He only took over in 2024, when the renovation was already 9 years behind schedule. So it's not his fault.
But the job is still not finished. The folks at the theater even made a play out of the construction disaster. It's called Grimpf, mimicking a sound of frustration.
The show claims to be based on true events and gives the audience an idea of what can go wrong if communication breaks down at a construction site. One scene is about a room where big concert pianos are stored. Concert pianos need a stable temperature, otherwise they have to be retuned. Retuning is time-consuming and expensive, so the plan was to equip the room with air conditioning.
But the air conditioning was installed in such a way that the doors to the room could not be fully opened anymore.
So in order to get the concert piano into that room, you would have to tilt it. When you tilt a piano and then set it back up again, you're going to be tuning it all over again, and you need extra manpower to tilt it. But since the whole point of the air conditioning was that you would sort of save tuning costs, that was a very typical example of shooting yourself in the foot.
What complicated things further in Cologne was the fact that the opera building is under landmark protection. That means it's considered to be of special value for Cologne's history and has to be preserved as close to the original as possible.
Which creates a dilemma. The building needs to look like it did in the 1950s, but with standards and regulations from the 2020s, from fire protection to heating and ventilation systems. So that's what the situation was when Jürgen Vollm took over management of the project.
The key challenge in this project was to reduce complexity. And so the first thing we did, we changed the project organizational setup.
You're probably thinking, okay, it's kind of obvious that a project that's 10 years behind schedule just needs better management.
According to the city of Cologne, 58 different companies with 72 trades have been involved in the renovation of the opera and theatre, plus 22 planning agencies.
In these large-scale projects, communication is a big issue. And this is the reason why so many large-scale projects fail. We're very good in solving technical problems, but not with communication issues.
Failure of communication was an issue in many large projects by the public sector in Germany.
One of Europe's biggest infrastructure projects, 3 decades in the making. Stuttgart 21 is a rail megaproject with a price tag to match.
The Elbphilharmonie, or the Philharmonic Hall in Hamburg, is 110 meters high, but it took much longer to construct than was originally planned.
Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. Why did it take Berlin 12 years and more than 6.5 billion euros, 10 times the original budget, to finish this airport?
Berlin's airport, Stuttgart's train station, Hamburg's concert hall and the Cologne Opera, they are all public sector projects.
So what makes these projects special? We will get there after these short messages.
Clarity is a competitive advantage, especially when it comes to the economy. That's because anybody can know what's happening, but understanding why it matters is crucial. Hi, I'm Kai Rizdal, the host of Marketplace. We provide the context you need to understand how the economy influences our everyday lives, from our local communities to the global conversation. You'll be smarter every time you listen, and these days, that's priceless. Listen to Marketplace on your favorite podcast app.
Norval Morso is one of the most famous Indigenous artists ever. Looking at his paintings, it's easy to see why.
Colors are intense.
Color is medicine.
But look a little closer, and you'll see something else. Fakes.
We believe it's the world's biggest art fraud.
There are thousands of fake Norval Morso paintings. Beneath some of these forgeries, assaults, abuse, and even an unsolved murder.
I want my paint back. I know you killed that boy.
Forged. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Now back to Delayland.
Berlin's airport, Stuttgart's train station, Hamburg's concert hall and the Cologne Opera, they are all public sector projects.
So what makes these projects special? They're all political in one way or another.
They are commissioned by governments, local, regional or national, and they are paid for with tax money.
Which tends to create a communication issue called optimism bias. No politician wants to approve a project that will take forever to complete and will cost a fortune in the process. So when the first plans are made, there's a tendency to assume everything will go smoothly and to communicate it like that.
That's optimism bias. And it's why budgets tend to be pitched lower than is realistic and deadlines tend to be over-ambitious. Because it's an optimistic message to sell to the public.
Then there are public tenders.
When private companies build new headquarters, they can hire whomever they want. But the public sector does not have this freedom.
To save on costs and in an attempt to avoid corruption, public sector projects are open for tender, a form of public bidding.
The city of Cologne had to publish all the tasks that needed to be done for the opera project, whether it was installing an air conditioning system or a new carpet. Companies from all over Europe could send in their offers. The city then chose the most cost-effective.
Cost-effective does not always mean the cheapest, but it's usually the way.
It doesn't have to be, though, as we will soon discover.
If you're running a complex project with dozens of companies all working on their cheapest bids just to win the contract, it can only go wrong.
We had a lot of insolvencies, a lot of bankruptcies of smaller construction companies. And bringing in new contractors is really challenging. It's time-consuming.
Let's say a bricklayer starts a wall, then goes bankrupt.
Everyone's schedule gets delayed. The plumber, electrician, plasterer, they all have to wait.
You scramble to find a replacement, but you can't just call anyone. You have to put it to another public tender.
And when you finally hire someone, you have to explain every detail to them until they are up to speed on the project.
And this is maybe for just one room, but in this opera project, there are 2,000 rooms.
In the private industry, you are usually much faster because you're not that restricted to these public regulations.
Okay, we got it. Big building projects are terribly complex and difficult, but they are complex and difficult everywhere.
So why is it that they fail so often and in such a spectacular way in Germany, out of all places, the land of rules and planning?
Wir müssen feststellen, dass Deutschland hier ein massives Problem hat.
Germany has a massive problem here. It's become the norm that big projects are no longer built quickly, efficiently, and in line with requirements. That good old positive image of Germany is no longer true.
Das gute alte positive Beurteilung von Deutschland so nicht mehr stimmt.
That's Rainer Holznagel. He's the president of the Taxpayers Association in Germany. They monitor how governments, local, regional and federal, spend the taxpayers' money.
According to Rainer, Germany needs to radically change the way public sector projects are planned and executed. That includes better oversight and not always choosing the cheapest bidder.
Wir verzetteln uns und wir sind nicht mehr in der Lage,
We get bogged down by regulations and can't set priorities. It's not only about money, but rather the many requirements, regulations, and standards that we have imposed on ourselves. Construction in Germany is very, very expensive, but not because the materials are expensive or because we pay high wages. It's because we have so many regulations, and they cost an enormous amount of money, time, and effort. It starts with environmental regulations and ends with safety regulations.
Das hört auf bei Sicherheitsauflagen.
Rainer told us stories about bridges that were renovated and then could not be used because of rules for nature conservation or landmark protection.
And that responsibility and oversight for all these different rules and regulations lie with different departments in a large administration. That can transform a planning process into a bureaucratic nightmare. Basically, it can become impossible for communication to succeed.
And then you get a political problem that is very similar to the one we discussed in episode 1 of Delayland, when we talked about Germany's train system. When voters feel governments are unable to solve problems, the voters lose trust in public institutions altogether.
Wenn ich mir den Zustand einiger Brücken anschaue.
When I look at the state of some bridges or roads and the Autobahn, don't get me started on the trains, the German state has a massive problem. And you can understand why people are so extremely unhappy.
Und dass die Bürger auch deswegen maximal unzufrieden sind.
And it's not as if we Germans are particularly happy-go-lucky to start with.
But we could learn from one of our European neighbors, a neighbor that has recently reconstructed a cathedral even more famous than Cologne's. And they did it on time and on budget.
As the spire of Notre Dame fell to the inferno, people in France and around the world looked on. The flames destroyed what 2 world wars did not, ravaging over 800 years of history.
France's President Emmanuel Macron says the cathedral will be restored to its former glory.
I want that goal to be reached within 5 years.
At last, 5 years after a devastating fire, the famous Notre Dame Cathedral is finally reopening.
So here we are in the center of Paris. It's a beautiful sunny day and there's an accordionist playing, and we think we cannot get more cliches of Paris in one recording. We are looking at Notre Dame de Paris, the famous cathedral.
This church was rebuilt in 5 years, according to plan and according to the budget.
The fire destroyed the spire and 2/3 of the roof structure of Notre Dame. But by 2024, it was open to the public again.
It has been called the miracle of Notre Dame.
Philippe Jost, président de l'établissement public Rebâtir Notre-Dame de Paris.
Philippe Jost is the president of a public institution established especially for the rebuilding of Notre Dame Cathedral, Rebâtir Notre-Dame de Paris.
His predecessor as president of the institution was a retired army general, Jean-Louis Georgelin.
Il parlait de la bataille des 5 ans.
He called it the 5-year battle. He used all these military terms to drive home his message, that we would take up the challenge, we would never doubt, and do what it takes to achieve victory.
Ça nous mènerait à la victoire, encore un terme militaire.
Given the pressure, the tight deadline and the military talk, you would think that the public institution for rebuilding Notre Dame would be run like a war room.
To be sure, there was something of that. They had to manage a huge construction site with 2,000 people from 300 companies. But the secret to their success lay in human relationships and good communication, said Philippe Jost, who, to humor us, sometimes slipped into English.
We have called that the spirit of Notre Dame. We work as a big family, together.
Instead of fighting and finger-pointing when the reconstruction ran into problems, as is often the way in Germany, the French discussed problems openly to find solutions fast.
On le faisait venir pour un contact de personne à personne.
We met personally with the bosses of all companies involved and said, "Congratulations, now you have to work hard to succeed." But we said we are here to help you. If you run into problems, put them on the table. We look at them together and we help you. We stand together in solidarity.
Et on vous aidera. On est solidaires. D'accord?
Trust was essential.
The construction companies knew that if they needed help, Philippe's team was there to support them to get the job done.
On est prêt à prendre notre part du fardeau.
As project managers, we were ready to shoulder our share of the burden. It's the attitude of a smart investor, because the money you spend to solve a problem fast is money well spent. It's like fighting a fire before it can spread.
C'est en fait comme traiter un incendie avant qu'il se soit développé.
But Philippe said he was also prepared for the worst. Almost a quarter of the reconstruction budget was provisions for price increases, unforeseen events and scheduling risks.
And they spent more than a year looking for the right companies.
160 contracts, European tenders. We had to choose the best. The best is not always the cheapest.
Another key element for success was the size of the institution Philippe was heading. It was not a giant ministry with lots of different departments, directors and sub-directors, and the infighting that often goes with it.
Instead, a public institution was created especially for the purpose, and they kept the team small. There were never more than 35 people.
Nous étions une petite entreprise qui parlait.
We were a small company that dealt with other small companies, and that helped, because we were not an enormous structure that's completely bogged down in complicated internal processes. But at the same time, we are not exempt from any regulations. Public tender rules, landmark protection rules for historic monuments, labor rules. We followed the law, no exceptions.
Rien que la loi. Aucune dérogation.
And still they stayed within their budget. 700 million euros total. Donations for rebuilding Notre Dame were even higher, 840 million euros. The extra money is used to renovate areas that were not affected by the fire.
Philippe told us their success at Notre Dame is not the norm for France either, but that he believed it can be replicated.
Il faut avoir confiance dans la nature humaine, human nature.
You must trust human nature. Everybody wants to succeed and create something beautiful. If you give them the means to do this, tell them we'll do this together, and that we're not here to make things complicated for them. Then it can work.
Pour vous compliquer les choses, ça va fonctionner.
After our meeting, we watched the masses of tourists lining up to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral. We were still impressed by what we had heard.
So, Nico, what was your takeaway?
I thought the most fascinating thing was this spirit he was talking about. This spirit that everybody works together, everybody has the same mission, that everybody, let's say, owns a part of this whole narrative and wants to finish the project within time.
At the same time, he did mention the enormous value for national and popular culture. Everybody knows this church. Everybody knew The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Victor Hugo novel, the Disney version of it, the musical.
But this pressure also gives you the feeling of being proud, being part of this project. Maybe that's sometimes lacking with bigger projects in Germany. It seems in Germany comes this bureaucratic culture into play, which dissolves motivation, which dissolves ownership, and which just creates delays.
On our way back home, we also thought about numbers. It took 700 million euros to rebuild Notre Dame. In Cologne, the opera renovation is far more expensive, more than twice as expensive, at 1.5 billion euros, all projected costs included.
That's the price of delays, denial that problems exist, and bad communication. The good news is that an end to the opera house renovation is in sight. The city hopes to put on performances at the historic venue at Cologne's Offenbachplatz by the second half of 2026.
After more than a decade of waiting, it'll be an emotional moment for opera singer Emily Hindrichs.
Cologne is the town of my family, of my great-grandparents, and there have been Hindrichses here since the 1600s. So if I get to sing at Offenbachplatz, that's the homecoming. That's what I've been waiting for.
But you can tell she's also angry about what you might call a total lack of flexibility in German planning.
There is always that stubborn, that rigid mindset that says, we have a plan, we wrote it down, it's supposed to go this way, but there is no plan B. There is no backup.
Theater actor Andreas points to another aspect of the whole disaster that he feels is typical for Germany, a tendency to avoid dealing with problems when they arise.
When I moved to Cologne, when I started at the theater, and this is like 14 years before we started renovating, I was told then already, this thing is in really bad shape. It has been totally neglected for 40 years. And so all of this was foreseeable. It didn't have to be like this. Germany has so underinvested into its infrastructure that when they actually get to it, the problems become just overwhelming.
These traits Emily and Andreas mentioned, the stubbornness combined with denial or the sticking rigidly to a plan without any backup, they seem to be a recurring theme in our podcast. What do you think?
It reminds me of episode 1 about Deutsche Bahn, where the decay in the system could be seen already quite long time ago, and nobody did anything about it.
And nobody took responsibility.
No, like in episode 2 about the car industry. The car maker said, hey, the world always loved our engineering and they always will, until the world started loving cars from other countries.
And now we are playing catch-up. Feels like this podcast is becoming something of a psychotherapy session for the nation. But if that's the case, if Germany is in a mental depression as well as financial, we need something to lift our spirits.
Yeah, and it's never too late to fix anything. Remember Cologne's cathedral? Construction stopped completely for centuries, but we got there at the end, even if it took 600 years.
Okay, but let's not get carried away just yet, because we've got more bad news for you. Episode 4 of Delayland is all about digital public services in Germany.
You want to know how that sounds like?
It's all about the future, man.
I have to ask someone, and she has to ask someone, and that person has to ask someone, and this takes months.
So, what do you think about Germany, and what should it learn from other countries?
Share your thoughts and write an email to delayland@dw.com.
Delayland, Germany and the Missing Magic is a DW production, researched, written and produced by us,
Andreas Becker
and Nicolas Martin.
Our editor was Zulfikar Abani.
Sound design by Warner Poland, audio editing and mixing by Simon Berghahn.
Executive producer Judith Hartl.
Special thanks to Thomas Neufeld, Ashutosh Pandey and the whole DW business team and the DW Hindi department.
People who contributed to this episode:
Neil King and Connor Dillon.
Cover art Nora Charlotte Tom and Anke Jordan.
Marketing Sam Baker and Sachin Sharma.
If you like this podcast, hit subscribe, leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, and tell your friends about it.
Thanks for listening, and come back next time.
You should tell the people who we are and what our new show is. I'm Robert Smith, and this is Jacob Goldstein, and we used to host a show called Planet Money. And now we're back making this new podcast about the best ideas and people and businesses in history. And some of the worst people, horrible ideas, and destructive companies in the history of business. We struggled to come up with a name, decided to call it Business History. You know why? Why? Because it's a show about the history of business. Available everywhere you get your podcast.